Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I've prepared another list video for all of you. As we begin to wind down this year of 2024, I wanted to reflect on 10 comics that really surprised me this year. Whether the narratives had twists and turns that kept me riveted, or simply maybe the book was different than I expected, this list was really fun to put together. Before we jump in though, I'd like to shout out the channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, perhaps some even featured in this video, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything there you like, you can actually use my discount code at checkout, the Comic Book Report, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's probably the best way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's list. First up, in no particular order, we have Batman White Knight presents Harley Quinn by Katana Collins. I think for me, why this book really surprised me this year was simply because I first kind of picked it up knowing that it was a spin-off of this kind of White Knight universe, or within the White Knight universe I should say. I really enjoyed everything I've read for the White Knight so far by Sean Murphy, and I was a little hesitant to venture into these spin-offs, especially when Katana Collins took the reins. I had never read anything from her before, and I didn't really know what to expect, but I was absolutely thrilled and delighted all the way through this marvelous collection. It absolutely feels like the Harley Quinn we have within this universe, but she just is given even more agency. I've said in previous videos that this rendition of Harley Quinn is amongst my favorites I've ever read, and to have her have basically her own adventure in this graphic novel, it was just a ton of fun to read. For those interested, this does take place after both Batman White Knight and its sequel, Batman Curse of the White Knight. But if you've read those, you are primed and ready to go with this collection. I absolutely loved it though. We have kind of an interesting whodunit, good versus evil kind of story, and we have Harley Quinn taking center stage as sort of the heroic protagonist figure. This whole thing just really worked for me. I liked the supporting cast of characters that we got here from the greater White Knight universe. I really enjoyed the new characters they created as well, and I just think that this was a very faithful and welcomed expansion on this universe. If you're already a fan of Harley Quinn, you might be surprised just the amount of depth they give to this character within this story. I think for someone who just wants to pick up a great book, this can also be a good worthwhile read. However, it would help to read those previous White Knight titles I mentioned, because this does happen in a specific time and place and overall world, and that definitely establishes it well. But yeah, a terrific book here that exceeded all expectations and was just such a welcome surprise to me as a reader and now fan of this incredible book. Next on my list is the Project Superpowers Omnibus Volume 1 from Dynamite Comics. This was by Jim Krueger and Alex Ross, amongst some others, and this is a paperback standard size omnibus edition is what they're calling it over at Dynamite. And I'll admit right from the jump that I am still making my way through this collection. It was provided by Dynamite, which really appreciated, but why it surprised me so much is that I went in just about completely blind to this series. I had no idea what to expect, what it was really about, and simply I was ecstatic at what I've been finding so far. So essentially Project Superpowers takes a bunch of heroes that debuted maybe in the golden age of comics, public domain kinds of figures that I would say most people, if not everyone, has never really heard of, and it basically repurposes them for a modern audience and narrative. And basically we have this story where this one superhero back in like the World War II days is fighting, but he actually has to basically stop some of his allies in order to presumably preserve and save the world. And now we pick up in a more modern context. This hero is aged but still alive, and he's basically trying to save and or release his old friends to stop an upcoming threat. And that's really just the beginning here in Project Superpowers. I was blown away again by what I found in here. The story was not only co-created by Alex Ross, but he provides a ton of the covers as well in this collection. collection, and this is just really a marvel. I think having a expansive and epically scoped superhero narrative like this outside the bounds of the big two, Marvel and DC Comics, there's just a degree of freedom here that I really just enjoy. And the fact that these are lesser known kind of legacy characters, I just felt like anything could happen. The stakes were palpable and real, and so far I've just been glued to it. I should say as well, for those interested, upon completion I do plan to do a full review of this title on the channel, so stay tuned. But yeah, this has been a delightful surprise that I just didn't know what to expect, and it's been a lot of fun. Next up, we have Old Dog by Declan Shalvey. This is Redact 1, or the Volume 1 of this series in trade paperback. This is a ton of fun as well. This is from Image Comics. Now, I did have an opportunity to interview Declan Shalvey on the channel not too long ago, and this was one of the books I talked to him about during that interview, but this was really something I didn't expect. Essentially, we have kind of a clandestine organization, secret special ops kind of group, and we basically have this older gentleman who seems to be an agent of this company doing these kind of international espionage, kind of black op missions. But in the midst of that, we also have a really intriguing science fiction story that even veers into body horror territory. In my mind, this is an absolutely fascinating blend of genres that I think is executed very well. I will admit the action is a bit visceral and intense. There is bits of blood or gore, but it's all here. The characterization is fun and interesting. I think that overall as a narrative, it keeps the audience in a dark a bit. You're trying to unravel the mysteries even as the characters are learning more about themselves and more is kind of gradually revealed. It does feel like the beginning of a much longer story or narrative. I know Declan Shalvey is still working on creating more within this world, but I for one will be standing by. I can't wait to play in this sandbox more. This was a really fun little trade paperback, wasn't overly expensive, and it was a delightful surprise. To me, again, the surprise came more from how expertly Shalvey blended these genres. It played with genre in a way that I hadn't seen much of. It wasn't uncommon for me to see these kind of espionage, action, spy thrillers that maybe had a little bit of sci-fi, but to also blend in horror elements, I just thought that was really fun. I hadn't really seen that before, and I also went in fairly blind to this series as well, so kind of by nature, this was a huge surprise to me, but it's another one that I was very grateful to have read and even reviewed this year. Next up today is Aquaman Andromeda by Rom V and Christian Ward. This is part of DC's Black Label imprint over here that's geared towards a little bit more adult or mature audiences. It also takes place kind of outside that main continuity as far as I know, but this was a ton of fun. The format is oversized and in more of that kind of boxy layout. I really like seeing it. I think that this is a great format to showcase more kind of art features or prestige kind of releases like this. I think it's only a 3-issue series. It's totally self-contained, and it is really fun for fans of science fiction and kind of psychological horror. That's really what we get here. I would actually say it's only kind of tangentially an Aquaman story. Yes, he is in it. Yes, some of his villains are in it, but he almost feels, I don't want to say inconsequential, but he's really not the main fixture of the whole series. Essentially, we have a team that boards this submersible to find some kind of artifact that seems to be buried on the ocean floor. But this artifact seems to have strange properties, and we kind of go into an unraveling kind of psychological thriller here across these 3 issues. And I just really like it. Narratively, it kind of struck a same chord as something like Sphere, if you ever saw that movie, or I think it was based maybe on a Michael Crichton novel, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, it plays in similar genres or wheelhouses there with the science fiction kind of psychological thriller, almost cosmic horror kind of elements. And honestly, the stylization and the artwork we get from Christian Ward, I just think is amazing. It feels otherworldly sometimes, and it's just vibrant and incredible. And I think it matches the tone that Rom V is trying to craft here. And again, that's something I think is done expertly well. I have gushed about this title a couple times throughout the year. It's probably one of my favorite books I've had the chance to read this year, but I keep coming back to it. And I think as far as a surprising read, this definitely takes the cake. Buying an Aquaman book, again, I am an Aquaman fan, but buying an Aquaman book like this, I just didn't really know what I was getting in for, and I was just so happy. This really is my exact kind of preference for genre or tone in a book. It struck all the chords for me, and again, really fun one. Next up on the list today, the first omnibus, we have Swamp Thing, the new 52 omnibus from DC Comics. This has writings from both Scott Snyder and Charles Soule. Why I bring that up is because this was probably my favorite surprise about this book, is that it included both runs in the new 52. I think initially I mistakenly assumed that Charles Soule and Scott Snyder co-wrote the issues, but no, we have Scott Snyder's run, and then about halfway through the book we pivot over to when Charles Soule is the writer on Swamp Thing. So why this was such a surprise is because I felt like I got two big Swamp Thing epics in one single volume. I would say that I think the transition between the writers is about that stark. You feel like you're getting two completely separate books that's just in one massive volume. And for me, this was a surprise I really enjoyed. I think even what we get as far as the storytelling is super, super different. I think Snyder's run at the beginning is much more of a body horror, kind of blockbuster action thriller, and when we transition to Charles Soule run, we get more of a flavor of a Swamp Thing I think I'm more familiar with, which is the kind of dark fantasy kind of stuff, light horror, and I really liked it. I really liked both quite a bit. Everything for Snyder eventually kind of bottlenecks and funnels into this grand kind of crossover, this event called Rot World, where we have the green, the red, and the decay or the rot basically at war with each other. So we have Swamp Thing, we have Animal Man, we have Arcane and more. Really a fun one, but again, we lean into body horror and just kind of action thriller. But once we get to Charles Soule stuff, we have these more, I don't want to say it's a slower burn, but we have these more drawn out, kind of thoughtful dark fantasy tales, and I really liked it. I liked it a lot. I don't know that I would say the collection is quite uneven. I would just say it's not really homogeneous. Like, these parts don't really mix together overly well, but if you think about it, you just get this whole experience, even if it's in two parts. I do think that this volume was an incredible read. It's a high bar for me within the new 52. I would easily say it's amongst a handful of favorites from this entire era. And yeah, a really welcome book for me this year, even if it was a little bit different than what I had expected initially. Next up, we have a release from Image Comics' Ghost Machine imprint. This is Geiger, the Deluxe Edition by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. This was a really fun series that I was first following when I got the original paperback they released for this a couple years ago now, but really enjoyed it. This kicked off the whole Ghost Machine world over there, kicked off the whole Unnamed universe. But when they went back and gave us this Deluxe Edition, it's oversized. It is just a towering book. But it includes the first 6 issues of that main run of Geiger, along with parts of the 80-page kind of giant special issue, and some extras, of course. A beautiful book itself. I think one of the biggest surprises for me in this book is just the sheer size of it. It's by far probably the largest trim size in my collection. It's just a massive book. And that was also a really welcome surprise for me. Another surprise, or maybe this wasn't a surprise because I knew it was included, but the parts of the 80-page special I had personally never read before. It was never included in that first paperback. So reading that was surprising in that I had just never read it. It was kind of uncharted territory. And while it was not my favorite aspect of this book, I was still really excited to read it. Now, this volume was given to me by the people at Ghost Machine, so again, huge thank you there. If you'd be interested in my review of either the paperback or this deluxe edition, you can definitely find that on my channel as well. But this is a really fun story. If you've never heard of it, it basically is a kind of radioactive-based superhero in the not-too-distant dystopian future, in this kind of wasteland vision of America, and he's basically just trying to right wrongs, help those that come across him, and yeah, I just thought it was a blast. It really got me excited for everything that Jeff Johns and team are doing over at Ghost Machine, and like I said, this edition is just a wonder. It's absolutely massive, and it was a high recommend from me. And hey, if you're enjoying this video and you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I would just like to invite you to do so. I'm always doing comic book list videos like this, or reviews, unboxings, and more. Thank you for considering. Now on with the show. Okay, and next on our list today is Spider-Man, the complete black costume saga omnibus from Marvel Comics. And I should say before I get much further, yes, this edition has a known misprint where there is a missing page. That's in this whole first print run. I know I had one other friend that mentioned a more severe misprint, but as far as I know, that is much less common. In fact, I have only heard it once. Okay, putting that aside, what was so surprising about this book for me? For me, this book was just very different than my expectation. To unpack that a little bit, this Black Costume Saga era for Spider-Man has always been a notable gap in my reading history. I had read a lot leading into this period, and I had read kind of afterward where we get introduced to Venom and kind of that miscellany, McFarlane era and beyond. But the actual era where he's in this black symbiote costume before he gets rid of it, I had just not read any of that. Same with a lot of the era where he's in a romantic relationship with Black Cat. Like I said, just a big notable gap in my history as a Spider-Man fan. They released the contents of this omnibus in two big paperbacks some time ago. They were long out of print. I never had an opportunity to get them for what I considered a fair price. So when I heard they were rolling all of that content into one awesome omnibus, I just knew right away I had to pre-order it. And I really enjoyed this book. I would say I think I expected it to be kind of Spider-Man's corruption story as he got more violent and angry as the symbiote took hold of him. But really what I found was just, yeah, maybe he's a little agitated, but he had a lot going on. We don't really have the kind of darkness I expected during this era with the character of Peter Parker. I think since then I don't want to say retcon, but they've definitely developed that more. There was even a spin-off sequence of miniseries called Symbiote Spider-Man they released recently that kind of played that up a bit more, kind of the nocturnal happenings that Peter Parker got into when he was asleep and the symbiote costume was driving him. But I didn't really see some of that darkness in this book, and I think that was the biggest surprise for me. Still a lot of really fun adventures, and I'm really happy I read it, but wow, what a huge surprise to me as a reader. Okay, keeping this list rolling, we have The Thing Omnibus from Marvel Comics by John Byrne and crew. Yes, this was a huge surprise for me this year. This might be kind of a funny pick for some, but I was definitely taken aback by this volume. I did read and review it on behalf of Organic Price Books as well as on my channel, but essentially this book was one I always had kind of hoped to read or I wanted to have in my collection. It's kind of a companion piece to the Fantastic Four by John Byrne omnibus sets. It is, kind of offset enough that you don't really need to read it. It's not an essential read, but it did happen around that exact same time period with this character and with this writer. But basically, what surprised me most about this omnibus is kind of like the Swamp Thing book. I almost felt like I was reading three different books in one. We just have distinctive eras for the Thing all wrapped up in this one massive book. The first portion of this book follows a lot of kind of deeply personal storylines for the Thing and just a couple of his random misadventures he gets into on his own, like with the Inhumans and a past fling from high school and beyond, or maybe college. Anyway, we have just kind of these smaller scale kind of personal stories that he just has these one-off adventures. After that, we get to the middle and kind of meat of this book, and this is what I was most interested in initially, which is what happened to the Thing after Marvel's Superhero Secret Wars. Light spoiler for that, at the end, we have the Thing not really joining back up with the rest of the superheroes and crew. No, he elects to stay on the battle world. And basically, the middle part of this omnibus is all of his adventures on this mysterious world. I really liked this. It pivoted the series into a total kind of science fiction epic. And then after that, the last third of this book has him trying to find his place back on Earth outside of the Fantastic Four. And we have him becoming a professional wrestler and kind of stuntman and so many other things. And it just kind of got zany and odd, but all wrapped up together. Just what a surprising book here. I really did enjoy my time with it. It was riveting and different than I expected. I think if you like this era of Marvel Comics, it could really be a fun read for many that might have passed it up. Okay, and next we have Black Panther by Ta-Nehisi Coates Omnibus. This was a Marvel book that had been on my wish list for so very long, and when Organic Price Books had a sale earlier this year, I knew I had to finally take a leap. So I got this book, and I have read the contents of it, and wow, this was something that I really enjoyed. This was really the first longer Black Panther run I had ever read, and I found myself really invested in the character and the supporting cast. I think why this was such a surprise to me, though, and this is going to be very similar similar to what I said about the Thing Omnibus as well as the Swamp Thing Omnibus, and that is because this book is largely partitioned into two separate halves that again feel so very different. The first half of this omnibus deals with kind of Wakanda and the nation and threats to the nation, and also goes into kind of the back history and origin, mythology, and lore for the Wakandans. And then the second half of the omnibus pivots to another kind of space opera science fiction adventure. Now, by the end of this book, the writer does wrap it all up in a really nice bow that honestly I was very impressed by. But these two halves of this run, that again were both written by the same creator with the same characters, I just thought was a real masterstroke. It was so illuminating and interesting. It caught me off guard, to say the least, and I enjoyed both parts immensely. To have it all in one single volume was a really just worthwhile treat. This is easily one of my more favorite Marvel omnis that I've read, recently or this year. I think it's a great modern run. I think if you are interested, even passingly, in the Black Panther, this might be one to pick up. I was first aware of this run after I had kind of gotten into the Captain America by Ta-Nehisi Coates omnibus. I knew he had written Black Panther, and I had so many people recommend this run to me, even on this very channel, and I'm so happy I took the ride. Like I said, I really liked it. I like Ta-Nehisi Coates' writing here, and I think what he does with Black Panther, his world, the mythos, just a real treat here. Definitely don't miss out on Black Panther by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And last, but certainly not least, rounding out 10 comics that really surprised me this year, we have the Micronauts Omnibus from Marvel Comics, Volume 1. This was a really fascinating book. This is the first volume of a 3-volume set that collects the kind of Marvel era of Micronauts. For those that don't know, Micronauts is kind of a late 70s, early 80s series that's based on a line of toys. Now, this is another kind of science fiction sort of epic. It's not set in space as much as inner space in kind of a microscopic dimension that is basically within the Marvel 616 universe. It stars this really eclectic ragtag group of characters. If you're thinking something like Guardians of the Galaxy, you are really not that far off. In fact, a lot of these characters feel like they could jump in and out of that world with relative ease. But we have a kind of evil, tyrannical dictator within the microverse, and we have this group of characters trying to stop his evil regime, right, wrong, save the day, explore inner space and the Marvel universe as a whole. Like I said, this is like a late 70s book. It was kind of one of those books that came out kind of in the wake of something like Star Wars, and it really feels like it's in that kind of wheelhouse or genre as well. I think if you like that period of science fiction, especially the kind of cartoony or fantastical elements, you would definitely enjoy this book. It feels very different from just about any other Marvel title I've ever read, other than the aforementioned Guardians of the Galaxy, I would say is probably the closest. But I really liked, not only did we get these adventures with these new characters, this great science fiction story, but the fact that it's actually embedded in the Marvel universe and you have Marvel heroes or characters show up, that just kind of messed with my mind. It was such a huge surprise whenever I saw a new Marvel character stroll in on the pages of Micronauts, and I think even in general, a surprise for how good I thought this series was. I think I thought it was going to feel more dated or kind of a little stiff, but I just really got immersed in this whole world, and I really like what we have here in this omnibus. This was one of my favorite reads of this year as well, and yeah, can't say enough about it. Really good stuff. Okay, and that's going to begin to wrap up 10 comics that really surprised me this year. I had so much fun putting this together, and honestly, I'm already beginning to think about my wrap-up lists at the end of the year that I'm hoping to release in December. Kind of my top 10s of this or that I've read this year, or maybe top 10s that were released this year. So if you like this video and you want to see more similar to this, definitely stay tuned to my channel in December, because I plan to release a good handful of kind of year retrospective reading lists and things like that. But yeah, this was so much fun. I'd love to hear in the comments, have you read any of my choices? What do you think about these series? Or maybe, what are some surprising comic book reads that you've read this year? Or generally, what books have really caught your attention over this last year that you just want to shout out or perhaps talk about with others in the comments section? Let me know all of that below, and thanks again so much for everyone watching. This has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your comment, a like, and maybe check out another video on your way out. Thanks again, everyone, and have a good one.